Our favourite time of the week to talk to our favourite person in the world, the wonderful Megyn Kelly Show, Sirius XM in the United States. Find it on YouTube, podcast, all the rest here. Well, Rockstar, this gets complicated, but a very important person gave evidence today about whether or not the person who is leading the prosecution on Donald Trump in the state of Georgia, who was in a relationship with the district attorney, and what he knew about when their relationship started. My God, this man can lie. He can lie for Australia. He can lie for the United States. What did you think about that weird day?
Okay, so much has happened since we last talked. This case is falling apart. Fani Willis is about to be kicked off this case, or at least should be. And along with her special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, they've been having an affair. They've been going all over the world together. And they have a witness who took the stand and said, I knew it, I saw it, and she told me all about it. So that's a really tough witness to get past. Now there's this other witness named Terrence Bradley, who used to represent Nathan Wade as a divorce lawyer. But before that, they were law partners together. They were friends. And this guy gave it up to a defense lawyer before any of this hearing took place. He was like, yo, they started it years ago. It's been going on for years, long before she hired him. I mean, all the stuff that the Trump defendants have been alleging about these two prosecutors, this guy put it in text messages and was like, right on, except when he got on the stand. And he was like, holy shit, I shouldn't have disclosed any of that. As it turns out, I'm either going to make an enemy out of Nathan Wade, who's kind of powerful in this region and I don't want to, or I'm going to disclose attorney-client privileged information, which is bad, which is not really what's happening. He's just more afraid of Nathan Wade. He claims he's been threatened in some of these texts. So he tried to lie. That's my opinion. Tried to lie at every turn and get out of these texts and be like, well, I didn't understand it. I don't remember it. I was actually just trying to confirm this one random word over here on page left instead of the huge paragraph over here on the right that I said right on underneath. He was just a liar. And repeatedly, the judge today said, you can move on, as he was getting cross-examined. I get it. I think we got it. And we did get it. We know this guy was lying on the stand, told the truth in the texts. And even though it didn't look like a spike the ball in the end zone moment for Team Trump today, it was. This guy discredited his denials, and what he wrote in the text messages obviously stands.
It's fascinating to watch, and people can watch this thing live either via the normal TV stuff or there's a million YouTube streams of these things. I love this judge, and not because this judge is doing, the work of MAGA. He seems to be the guy who's actually in the middle, forcing people to say, no, you can't hide, you can't run around, you have to answer questions. And that's how it's supposed to work. But you can see so often, particularly the questions that are coming up on the behalf of the state that are desperately trying to shut the whole thing down, that in other courtrooms, this thing never would have got out of first gear. But this guy goes, no, I want to learn about this.
He is bending over backward to be fair to both sides. To me, as somebody who's irritated by Fani Willis and thinks that she's lying, I'm annoyed. Sometimes I'm annoyed. I'm like, stop, shut their ridiculous repeated objections down so I can hear the testimony. But he's extremely fair to her. He really is. He lets her counsel object to everything. Finally, the defense today started saying, I think there's some leading the witness. These are speaking objections. A speaking objection is when you as the lawyer are telegraphing to the witness what you'd like them to say. Well, I think he testified earlier. He has absolutely no knowledge of that. And he's been very clear. He has no personal knowledge he can offer this court on that point. That's a speaking. So finally, the judge started to get that in hand today. But whoever loses will have no objection that this judge was not fair. He's been pretty incredible.
Let's talk about the person from the Air Force who essentially killed himself by setting himself on fire. He did so because he was opposed to the war in Gaza. He ended up dying after setting himself on fire, but obviously this was the act that ended up killing him. What do you think of this? Because it's pretty huge to see a service person willing to essentially take their own life to make a point about something that American troops are not involved in.
This is absolutely sick. What this guy did is sick, and the reaction to it is equally, if not more, sick. So he decides, as far as I can tell, there's no long history of empathizing with the citizens of Gaza or the Palestinians. However, there is a very questionable past affiliated with this group that may or may not have been abusive, and it doesn't appear that this guy had the best of childhoods. Obviously, he's mentally unwell. All right, he's either completely crazy, the way we understand that term, or he was crazy in the way we understand that term is applied to people like ISIS, who burn people in cages. All right. It's one or the other. There's something very, very deeply wrong with this man who set himself on fire with an accelerant in front of the Israeli embassy here in the United States. On any other given day, we'd say, my God, it's sad for his loved ones. That was uncomfortable. Don't show it on TV. And we'd move on. It's not going to change a thing about the Palestinian debate. So it's completely dying in vain. Not to mention it happens to be a sin. He's supposed to be a child of God, but okay. But the left reaction to this, their reaction has been absolutely stomach turning. They're celebrating him for his, quote, courage and his convictions, and are taking on anyone like me who says this guy was obviously mentally unwell. Oh, there's no evidence of that. Well, other than the fact that he set himself on fire, there's that little detail. They're like, no, he was of clear mind. It was all about Palestine, about dying for the cause. And you've got presidential candidates. You've got Cornel West coming out and cheering this guy on, saying, let us never forget the extraordinary courage and commitment of brother Aaron Bushnell, who died for truth and justice, and goes on from there. And there are many others that sound just like that. So the left has lost its ever-loving mind, and what they're doing is encouraging more of this. And this really is one of those situations where if they keep this up, they're going to have blood on their hands.
Now, also, let's talk about the murder of a student at the University of Georgia. The immigration status of the person accused is really significant here. But this story, this is one of those ones that's starting to get a bit of wall-to-wall coverage, and people are desperately interested in every detail. For those of us in Australia that aren't across it, what's happened?
A young woman, 22 years old, named Megyn Riley, who was at the University of Georgia nursing school, was murdered in broad daylight. She went for a run between the hours of 9 a.m. and noon or 1 p.m. and was attacked, brutally attacked, for the fun of it, is how it looks, by an illegal immigrant. No murders on this campus in 30 years. What changed? Our open border. That's what changed. This guy came in, we now know, in 2022 under Joe Biden's presidency, came right across the border claiming he needed asylum from Venezuela. And he happened to have a wife. And so, boy, you have a wife, they're never going to track you down. They're not even tracking down the single men who are of fighting age, which this guy is. But he has a wife, and they were going to seek asylum because Venezuela is so hard, and they didn't want to be there. And what they decided to do was take the life of this young woman after he committed at least 2 other crimes. But he wasn't deported. He was set loose by, I think it was the NYPD, before ICE could even slap a detainer on him. Not that the NYPD would have responded to it, because New York is a sanctuary city. So they don't cooperate with the federal immigration authorities who say, hey, hold him till we can get him and deport him, which they never really say anyway, because we're not deporting people. But in any event, it was a failure of this young woman by virtually every government authority that there is. And it's just time for this to stop. I'm sick. I've covered so many young women of this age who wind up murdered by illegal immigrants. Kate Steinle out in San Francisco, Molly Tibbetts in the Midwest, and now Megyn Riley here. These are all similarly aged girls who get attacked out of nowhere or shot dead out of nowhere by someone who had no business being here, and whose presence we ignored and felonies we ignored, sometimes deported multiple times, 5 times in the case of the one woman, Kate Steinle. And every time we say, it's sad, but really can't change policy in response to this one crime or these 2 crimes or these 3, and on it goes.
Now, we famously had a conversation on your show about Australia's attitude towards illegal immigration. It took reporters a few days to work out that we had that conversation, but it made big news because you were impressed with the Australian situation, which is, if you come here illegally, sorry, bugger off. We're going to send you off to a third country, hopefully send you back to the country of whence you came. I think that most Americans would agree with that, and obviously we're an island, it's different, but if you make it across the southern border, then you should be detained. If you make it into a city, you shouldn't be hidden by sanctuary cities. And I think that the politics has absolutely turned here from what was accused of racism under Trump is now what people demand under Biden, even though he's seeking credit for a fire that he started.
I think you're right. I really see the numbers changing. This is becoming one of the most important issues to Democrats, which we've never seen before, not in recent history anyway. And there's a reason Joe Biden and Donald Trump on Wednesday are both going to the southern border, about 300 miles apart, but they're both going to the southern border. And this is, the same administration that told us there's no problem at the border. The border's closed. The border's secure. And now President Biden has to go down personally because he realizes his reelection is definitely on the line over this issue. I mean, he will be bounced out of office if these numbers continue. And really, honestly, at this point, even if they don't, like, people know he can try to look like he cares. He can try to look like it was the Republicans who scuttled that bill because they don't care about the border. People know the truth. You look back under Trump in 2020, we had 400,000 people cross the southern border, which is 400,000 too many. But this past year, we've had 3 million under Joe Biden. There's been almost no attempt at enforcement. They're coming into the country with fentanyl, drugs, with young women who are being raped and exploited by the coyotes and the drug cartels, and they're murdering our people. This woman was a 22-year-old healthy woman out for a jog, staying healthy so she could become a nurse and take care of others. Universally praised as a lovely, delightful, kind, and loving person, cut down in the prime of her life by this loser, derelict criminal who we rolled out the red carpet for to come into this country. I'm sure we're going to hear stories about us giving him a hotel and food stamps and probably a plane ticket to wherever he wanted to go. And for what? So he could murder our most promising, our best and our brightest. And what's the accountability? Who cares if he goes to prison? I don't even care. I want him out. I want them all out. I want them to get back to their own countries and they can terrorize the people of Venezuela instead of the United States, where we used to be a country of law and order.
Sing it, sister. MK for 28. We need you for a few more years here so you can be president in 2028, okay? We love you, darling. See you next week.
Love you too. Thanks for having me.